Did you know Captain America was supposed to hit theaters years before the MCU even started? Yeah, back in 1997, Marvel was already planning to bring him to the big screen. But as with many Hollywood projects, things didn't go as planned. Legal battles, creative changes, and some surprising decisions along the way could have given us a very different Captain America. But what about the rest of the movie? How different could it have been? So let's go back to the year it all started. In April 1997, Marvel Studios had already set the wheels in motion, planning to bring the iconic hero to theaters. They were in talks with producers Mark Gordon and Gary Levinson, and writers Larry Wilson and Leslie Boehm were on board to craft the script. It seemed like Captain America was on track to make his cinematic debut well before the MCU even existed. But then, as often happens in Hollywood, things don't go according to plan. By May 2000, Marvel had teamed up with Artisan Entertainment to push the project forward. Just as everything seemed to be moving in the right direction, a major setback hit. Marvel Comics found themselves in a legal battle with Joe Simon, one of Captain America's co-creators, over who truly owned the rights to the character. This lawsuit threw the entire project into limbo, stalling development for years. It wasn't until September 2003 that the legal issues were finally resolved. But by then, Captain America's big screen debut had been delayed far beyond what was originally intended. Had things gone as planned, we could have seen Captain in theaters much earlier. Now, after the legal issues were finally resolved, Marvel had a big decision to make. They thought about giving the film rights to Warner Bros. But then producer David Maisel had a crazy idea. Why not make the movie themselves? It was a risky move, but in 2005, Marvel secured a massive $525 million investment from Merrill Lynch. This gave them the money they needed to produce 10 films on their own, including Captain America. Paramount Pictures agreed to distribute the movie. Now, in the end, Joe Johnston was the final choice to direct Captain America: The First Avenger. But before he came on board, things could have gone in a very different direction. Jon Favreau, who would later become famous for directing Iron Man, actually wanted to direct Captain America. But as a comedy, eventually he decided to stick with Iron Man instead. And then, Louis Leterrier, the director of The Incredible Hulk, was so impressed by the concept art for Captain America that he offered to direct the film. But Marvel turned him down. Now again, just as things seemed to be moving forward, another setback hit. The 2007 Writers Guild of America strike put the project on hold, stalling any progress. It wasn't until January 2008 that Marvel managed to reach a deal with the Writers Guild to get their writers back to work. Then in May 2008, right after Iron Man became a massive success, Marvel officially announced The First Avenger, Captain America, with plans to release it on May 6, 2011, though it eventually got pushed back to July 22nd. And then finally, in November 2008, Joe Johnston signed on as the director. He brought in Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely to rewrite the script, giving the film the final push it needed to become a reality. We were this close to seeing an entirely different Captain America on the screen. When it came to planning the plot for The First Avenger, Captain America, the creative team made a pretty bold decision. Instead of having Captain America fight Nazis as you'd expect in a World War II movie, they decided to take a different route. They didn't shy away from including Nazis. Kevin Feige even loved the classic comic cover where Cap punches Hitler, but they felt it made more sense to focus on Hydra as the main villain. This choice stayed true to the comic books and gave the movie that unique Marvel twist. In February 2010, director Joe Johnston teased that the invaders would show up in the second half of the film. Fans got really excited, thinking this meant the World War II era superhero team from the comics would make an appearance. But in November, Johnston clarified that characters like Submariner, a member of that team in the comics, wouldn't be in the movie. Instead, he explained that they were considering using the Invaders as a name for the squad of commandos led by Captain America. This approach allowed the film to stay grounded in the Marvel Universe while still paying homage to the era's history. In July 2010, Marvel Studios dropped a bombshell. Both Captain America and Thor were going to be released in 3D. This was a huge deal back then, with 3D movies taking theaters by storm. But when director Joe Johnston did a one-day test shoot with the 3D gear, he quickly discovered something. Shooting in 3D wasn't as simple as it seemed. The equipment was bulky and technical issues popped up left and right, turning what should have been an exciting leap into a bit of a nightmare. Despite these challenges, Johnston saw it as a new hurdle to overcome, even if he wasn't thrilled about it. Meanwhile, Kevin Feige was determined to make sure this didn't impact the film's quality. He reassured everyone that because they had committed to 3D early on, they were going to take their time, making sure every visual effect looked stunning in 3D. It was a risky move, but if done right, it would add an extra layer of excitement to Captain America's journey. Another major turning point in Captain America's story is his whole man-out-of-time situation. You know, being frozen during World War II and then waking up in a world that's moved on without him. It's what gives him that unique perspective, making him the old-school hero with values that sometimes clash with the modern world. But there was a deleted scene from the Avengers that could have made this even more powerful. In this scene, we see Steve Rogers really struggling to fit into his new reality. It's not just about figuring out smartphones or dealing with modern slang. It's the deep, gut-wrenching loneliness of realizing that everything and everyone he ever knew is gone. Imagine waking up in a world where your friends, your family, and your entire life are just history. This scene would have shown Steve as more than just the perfect soldier. It would have made him more human, showing that even a super soldier can feel lost and out of place. Had this scene stayed in the movie, it would have added so much more depth to Cap's character. It would have made his journey in the MCU even more interesting than we'd see, just by how much he's carrying with him as he steps into the role of a leader for the Avengers. But the man who brought the Avengers together in the first place would be Nick Fury. He made his first appearance in that iconic post-credits scene. From there, he became the glue holding the MCU together in its early days, recruiting heroes left and right for his Avengers initiative. But there was almost a moment in Captain America: The First Avenger that would have given us a deeper look into his character, especially in how he interacts with Steve Rogers. In a deleted scene, Fury himself welcomes Steve to the present after he's thawed out of the ice. Now, picture that. Instead of some faceless S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, it's Fury in the flesh breaking the news to Steve that he's not in 1940s anymore. If this scene had made the cut, it would have redefined the relationship between Fury and Rogers. Instead of just being the no-nonsense leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., we'd see a more compassionate side to him, someone who understands the emotional toll of what Steve is going through. Now let's move on to something else. What if I told you Glenn Powell could have been the one throwing that iconic shield instead of Chris Evans in Avengers: Infinity War? Back in the late 2000s, when Glenn Powell was just starting out in Hollywood, he was actually in the running to play Captain America. Can you imagine that? Before Chris Evans won us all over as Steve Rogers, Glenn had a shot at the role, but as fate would have it, he didn't quite nail his audition. It was early in his career and not many knew his name yet. He later shared that he totally screwed up that final audition. But even Chris Evans was hesitant about taking up the shield at first. He actually turned down the part initially, but guess who changed his mind? Robert Downey Jr. himself. He encouraged Evans to grab the role and, well, you know, the rest is superhero history. But why Chris Evans? The director saw something special in him. They needed an actor who could portray Captain America's strength and leadership, while also capturing his vulnerability and moral struggles. And Chris managed to do just that. In terms of physical stature, Chris Evans had the ideal build for a superhero. He bulked up significantly to play the role, embodying the strong and heroic figure of Captain America. In comparison, while Glenn Powell also has a strong build, Chris's physique after training was just more in line with the director's vision of the super soldier. Now, if you thought Glenn being Captain America is strange, did you know that Keira Knightley was almost cast as Peggy Carter in the Captain America series? Yeah, that's right. But here's the kicker. She's super famous for playing Elizabeth Swann in the Pirates of the Caribbean. Those pirate movies were huge, raking in over $1 billion. So you might wonder, could fans really see her as anyone else? When it comes to casting big roles, directors have to think about how we, the audience, see these actors. Kiara as Elizabeth was adventurous, caught up in a world of fantasy and high-seas drama, switching from that to Peggy Carter, a tough, no-nonsense agent in the gritty setting of World War II, and that might have been a stretch for some fans to wrap their heads around. And that's where Sarah Finn, the director, comes into play. She figured we might not buy into Kiara as Peggy, because we're so used to seeing her dodging cannonballs rather than fighting Nazis. So they went with Hayley Atwell for Peggy Carter. Now, moving on to Captain America: Civil War. Now, this movie has had its fair share of deleted scenes that could have changed the MCU, and one of them had a huge impact on Bucky Barnes' story. During the epic clash of the Avengers, there's a brief moment where Bucky gets his hands on Captain America's shield. After using it in the heat of battle,
Nice save.
I gotta get me one of those.
Now, this might seem like a throwaway line, but it actually hints at something much bigger. In the comics, Bucky takes up the mantle of Captain America for a while, and this comment subtly teases that he might have been destined to do the same in the MCU. If this scene had stayed in the movie, it could have been the first hint that Bucky was meant to be Steve Rogers' successor, setting him up to eventually become the next Captain America. Alright guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes movie content. Stay tuned for more exciting insights and untold stories, and we'll see you in the next one.